So, in your role at Penske, there are a lot of people that report to you. What leadership skills do you feel are valuable in your position?
Um, well, in no particular order. One is sort of a sense of empathy, making people understand that I've been where you are, so I understand what you're um, uh, dealing with and going through, whether that's your stage in life, your family situation, or this point in your career where you are. And I think that's very important to remember because as you sort of ascend up the ladder and suddenly find yourself leading a group of people, it's very important, I think, to remember what it was like when you were in their position. I also think um, other skills that are very important are the ability to delegate, the ability to let go of things. It's hard to let go and give people the empower them to do things, but you have to because you can't do everything. And I think where a lot of people fail in leadership, quite frankly, is not letting go. And that was hard for me. It took me a little while to kind of get that, to be honest with you. But it's really important because you get better results from people when they have ownership of their own work and their own responsibilities without you constantly looking over their shoulder. Um, and then I think the last thing I would say is, and this is kind of hard to describe, a sense of calmness. Let's put it that way. There are times in any kind of endeavor where things get a little tense or there's difficulty. You're dealing with uncertain, especially in the business world these days. Uncertainty and lack of clarity, and that tends to make people very nervous. And as a leader, you really sort of need to keep kind of a calm head. You may be freaking out on the inside, and that's okay, but you can't let people see that.
When we look at leaders, there seems to be so many different types. So, how would you define a leader, or what would you define leadership as?
I always think of leadership as the ability to get a group of people uh, to accomplish something and accomplish something that you've set as a goal, and they will follow you. You lead. I mean, you have a leader and followers. And if the people aren't following you, then you're not much of a leader, if that makes any sense. So I would say, and I don't. I mean, there's a lot of books about leadership, and you can look at leaders over the years, whether it's football coaches or politicians or heads of industry. And I think the one thing that doesn't work is kind of the dictatorial, my way or the highway. I think a leader is, as I said, somebody who's able to set a goal and get other people to meet it.
Who is a person in your own life that inspired you to become the leader that you are now?
I didn't. I don't think I ever set out to be a leader. I don't think it was ever really something that I necessarily aspired to. And it just, in my career anyway, it just kind of evolved. And um, I don't know that people inspired me. I looked at people in leadership roles, again, primarily in business, and I observed how they did things, and I kind of took mental notes of what things I think worked and what things I think didn't work.
There are many characteristics that leaders possess, and the ability to delegate and empower others are some of them. How has your ability to delegate and empower others helped you in your endeavors as a leader?
Well, I touched on this a little bit earlier. I mean, it's just been, and again, I wasn't always a good delegator. And one of the one of the funny things that happened to me early in my Penske career, like really early, like in the first couple of weeks, I was used to working in a law firm where the partners, who are the people you worked for, tended to be very controlling of, look, you got to do the contract this way, and here's how you do it. And I didn't like that very much, but that was the way it was. And so you constantly reported up what you were doing. So I went into my new boss's office and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I'm working on this contract for this customer." And, he's like, "Okay." And so finally, about the third or fourth time I went into his office to say that, he sat me down. He said, "Listen," he said, "you don't have to tell me everything you're doing." He said, "I hired you because I thought you had judgment and ability. And until you prove me wrong, go ahead and do what you're doing." and come to me if you have a big problem or something. But so I learned, I was like, oh, well, this is liberating. So when I got into the position where I had people working for me, I really never forgot that. And I've always tried to give them, empower them to take ownership of their work.
So, what, if any, obstacles did you have to overcome to get where you are today?
I would say that uh, confidence, self or lack of confidence. Let's put it that way. I mean, when I was younger and starting out, I was constantly um, very prone to second guess myself. Not sure, am I really good enough to do this? Um, it turns out I was, but I didn't really, I didn't necessarily have the confidence that that I do now. Um, another thing I think that was a bit of an obstacle was, I tend to be, this is a personality quirk. I tend to be non-confrontational. Um, I don't like confrontation. But I became a corporate lawyer in part because we're problem solvers. That's what we do. We're not in the courtroom battling, other lawyers. But being sort of non-confrontational and kind of easygoing, in some ways, that can be perceived by some people as weakness. And I think so, in some ways I had to overcome a bit of that. I wasn't kind of a big rah-rah self-promoter, kind of thing. I kind of tried to just, let the work speak for itself and my
Mhm.
personality speak for itself. And in the long run, that worked. But I do think sometimes that kind of laid back way, and not being sometimes you have to be confrontational, right? I mean, there are times when people who work for you are doing what they need to do, and you need to have difficult conversation. And again, we've talked about delegation. That it took me a little while to overcome the inclination not to delegate. I think those were the main obstacles that
Mhm.
I found that I had to sort of train myself to overcome.
Thank you for that